Okay, so we're talking about geometric sequences. First of all, this is not a geometric sequence. This one is the kind that we learned yesterday. It's an arithmetic sequence. And so the common difference, if you subtract to see how much it went down, what did you say that was again? Negative 4.2. Make sure you have that written in your notes. Next thing, what recursive formula generates this sequence? All right, so that's the u sub n minus 1. It always starts with something, though. It always starts with u sub 1, or it could start with u sub 0. But I like to use u sub 1 on this kind of a problem. And it's the first term, and that's 10. Would you see if you can write the rest of the formula down correctly for me? And I'm going to have a few of you send me your response via email in a minute, so make sure you do a decent job here. I don't need the 11th term even. All I'm asking right now is for the formula. Okay, here's a screenshot of one of my fine students who says it's u sub 1 equals 10, u sub n equals u sub n minus 1, and then he has a minus 4.2 in a parentheses there. All right, that's pretty good. Now, if you actually put it into a calculator that way, let me ask you, do you think there's a chance that it might not subtract 4? You think it might multiply by 4. Why? Because it's in a parentheses. Okay, but it's a good way to set it off from the other info there. But if you actually type that into the calculator, you probably would have this on the calculator. U sub n minus 1. And then you could just go minus 4.2. Like this. If you put that in parentheses like this, your calculator will interpret that as a, oh, you want me to multiply by negative 4.2. Do you get what I'm saying? So, it's okay to have it the way you have it. Just be aware that if you put it in the calculator that way, it's probably going to think you meant multiply. All right, now let's talk calculator for a second. Oh, wait. Yeah, I have one other answer I want to look at. I'm going to pause for a second. All right, so this is another one. This kid went on and found the 11th term even, but there's still something missing about this formula. Anybody remember? Ooh, here's a hand. Yes? The greater than or equal to 2 thing. It really should say n is greater than or equal to 2. It's not a big deal, but it's called the domain, and it's this number here is always just one bigger than whatever number you had right there. All right, so don't forget that part. All right, pausing again. Okay, saw some other student work there, and we're moving on. A geometric one is pretty much the same thing as the arithmetic one. It's just that you multiply. So like for instance, you take 2, you multiply by 3 and you get 6, you multiply by 3 you get 18, and then I don't even know what you multiply by 3 to get that. Let me see, 30, 40, 54 I think is the next one. But anyway, if I was going to ask you to write the formula for this, you still start with u sub 1 equals 2. You always say how you start. And then you put in u sub n equals u sub, and I got some people last hour that were not sure what I was saying there. It's u sub, as in subscript, n. U sub n. U sub n minus 1. And then I have to like do what I do to get from here to here, and that's times by 3. So I just put a 3 in parentheses. Do you get that that means times by 3? Because of the parentheses? And if I don't put parentheses, and I just put a little like this, that means times by 3 also. Either way is fine. Okay? All right, and then I always have to end with n is greater than or equal to what in this case? 2. Because of that's a 1, I use 2. And that means that this formula won't help you figure out the very first term. You have to be given the very first term, which in this case is the 1. So it only works when you get to u sub 2. All right, just to make sure you're really getting this, if I had a list of 2, 4, 6, 8, just the even numbers, right? Do you get that I could start with u sub 1, u sub 2, u sub 3, u sub 4, or I could go u sub 0, u sub 1, u sub 2, u sub 3. Either one's okay. Now here's the question a lot of kids the last hour got wrong. So what's the first term? They thought that if I numbered it this way that this was the first term. Can you see it's just not the first term? The first term is actually the 2. No matter which system you use, that is the first term. So you might ask, why would you ever not just start with 1. Why don't you just always start with 1? And I actually started to do that for a while in my in my classes. But then when we started to do more real world problems, it messes you up. Let me give you a reason. Say you've got 10,000 bucks. I want you to add a page to your notes right now. Get back with me. Add a page to your notes. Blank page. Put in 10,000, comma, 10,400. Let's say that that was money. And let's say that that was you starting with $10,000 in your bank account. Is that realistic for a kid? Well, not many of you have 10 grand sitting around, but let's say that grandpa decided to give you 10 grand towards college. Okay, so now you get this 10 grand sitting in an account. That's your starting amount, right? Could you call that u sub 1? Yes, but let me show you why u sub 0 is better with money problems. If I say that's u sub 0, then we'll now logically the next 10,400, that must be u sub 1 then, right? So answer this for me. Why did the money grow after 1 year? Yes? Interest. So it looks like I have 4% interest on the money that I had. Do you get how if I asked you this question, how much money did you have after year 1, that the way I numbered it would be kind of smart? Because year 1 would match up with u sub 1. What if I had started with u sub 1 here and u sub 2 was here, and then I asked, how much money do you have after year 1? Do you see how you'd have to choose u sub 2 to see how much money you have to have after year 1? It doesn't match up so nice. All right, so when do you pick what? If I asked you for what's the second term, then the red way is the way to go. If I ask you what's the second term, u sub 2 goes with the second term. If I asked you for how much do you have after the first year, then it'd be smarter to use the green way. So you could start with u sub 0 or u sub 1. In fact, one more thing. I want you to erase everything except these two numbers. All right, now I want you to label it with u sub something that goes with this. This is last year, Grandpa gave you the money, and this year, you now have 10,400. U sub what would you use? See if anybody comes up with the way that we math teachers do it. Last year is the 10,000. This year you've got the 10,400. Okay, did anybody think to do it this way? U sub last year would have been what year? This year, U sub 2012. Do you get what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be U sub 0 or U sub 1. It could be based on the year. All right, so you can start with anything you want. But my general advice is if you're really kind of shaky at this still, start with U sub 1 always. Unless it's a real world problem that's saying, after 2 years, how much money does he have? Those kind I would probably start with U sub 0. I don't think you're quite ready to be using those years for sub numbers, but it works pretty well in some situations. Okay, back to our regular notes here. Look at this triangle problem. I want you to read it for a moment. Please get on the right screen. One interesting way I can check and see if you're on the right screen now is we're starting to have more color on our pages. So we can see if a screen is showing up as like red, where you're supposed to be pretty much on this one's kind of like a blue. I can sort of see that, oh, the haze that comes up from the screen is the wrong color. Must be in the wrong spot. It's not perfect though. One other thing I'm being advised, and it's probably good advice, is that I should be sliding the desks forward so that I can walk around behind the back row, because it's a lot easier to see what's on screens that way too. So I can see it on your face. It's kind of a light green haze on your face. See, it was green. All right. So anyway, this problem has one red triangle. This one has what? What does this one have? And then therefore, logically, 27. And now, do you see that that is going up geometrically? Which means it's multiplying by what in this case? 3. All right, so this is called a common ratio then. Do you notice how I can take this divided by this? Notice which way I went. I did not take 1 divided by 3. That would be 0.3 repeating. I take the 3 divided by the 1, and that tells me the common ratio is 3. Notice you got to go this way. 9 divided by 3 to tell what the ratio is. Kids always do that in the opposite order. So just don't make that mistake. Start with the one on the right and divide by the one on the left. It's counterintuitive. Okay, what would be the common ratio for the sequence if this terms in the series were reversed? Well, that means if it started with 27, then went to 9, then went to 3, then went to 1, you obviously wouldn't use a 3 anymore. What would you use? A 1/3. Because you take this divided by this. What's 9 divided by 27? It's 1/3, or 0.3 repeating. Okay, so this answer is 0.3 repeating, or 1/3. All right, moving on to the next page. We need to use a calculator to do this part. So grab your calculator. Get your calculator into sequence mode if it isn't already. And it looks kind of like this. Now, if you've already done a sequence with it before, don't go delete everything. Like, for instance, this 1 at the top, that's right already. We're going to start with the use of 1, because this is not a real-world problem involving money or etc. Okay, so then, down here, do you see how I won't have to retype in u sub n minus 1? It's already there. So I just have to go to the what changed here. Well, it's now, looks like it's growing here. Take a guess what we multiply by. Is it multiply or add? If we try and see if it's multiply or add, do you get that this would be add 2.7 to go from here to here? Or 2.5, sorry. Do you get how adding 2.5 will not make 7.5 turn into 11.5? Okay, so it's obviously not adding. Then it's probably multiplying by what? Okay, and how did you get that? Perfect. That divided by that gives you 1.5. And so its common ratio is 1.5, and it's geometric. I'd circle it, and I put the 1.5 there. Now, what's the value of the 21st term? We've got to put it into the calculator to figure that out. So, on your calculator, go to make this multiply by 1.5. So I'm going to change this here to a parentheses 1.5. Now, I can use a time sign in there if I want. But if I just put it in parentheses, it'll know it might mean multiply. Then I got to tell it what to start with. The third line of the calculator is always, what was your u sub n min? And my n min is 1. U sub 1 is what? It's 5. Our first term is 5. Once I've entered all that, now there's 2 smart ways you can get the 21st term. Give me an option. What? Table. Good. Got another option? Go to your main screen, go to second quit, and then u is right above the 7, and then parentheses 21. Perfect. U sub 21, hit enter, and I'm going to come around and check that your answer came up the same as mine. 16,626. Okay, I'm back. A few kids had some calculator difficulties there, but I think overall we're going to be okay on this. So I think you get the idea. It's the same exact thing as yesterday. The formula is going the same way, except instead of adding something each time, you're multiplying by some number each time, or dividing. Actually, you don't ever divide. If I wanted to divide by 2, what would I multiply by? 1/2. If I wanted to divide by 3, what would I multiply by? 1/3. You get the idea? What if I wanted to multiply by 1.6? No, wait. So what if I wanted to divide by 1.6? Times by 1 over 1.6. That's what that really is a flip. of the number. You remember when it was 3, and I'd say multiply by 3, that's same as divide by, or 1/3, you flip it. Or instead of multiplying by 1/3, you could divide by 3. They kind of go in, they're reciprocals of each other. Okay. I think we should just get to your homework and start the first homework problem together. So everybody find under assignments where the homework is for today. It says homework assigned on 222, geometric sequences, that one. I'm going to go to the iPad version right there. Once you're in, you guys will obviously go to the notes version of it. But the most common mistake I get on this first one is kids think that just because it starts with u sub 0, that the first term then isn't the 32, it's the next number. Know what I mean? They think that the first term can't be 32. It is. The first term is 32. Whatever goes here is your first term. They're just calling it u sub 0. Okay, so what's the second term? Well, you can use the calculator to do it, or you could just take 32 and multiply it by 1.5, which means 32 plus 16, which would make 48. If you can't do that in your head, it's fine to use the calculator for this. Now, if you were going to put this in the calculator, it starts with the u sub 0. Where do I do that on the calculator? That is here under the y equals. The very top number is what you're starting with. Are you starting with a u sub 0, or are you starting with a u sub 1? In this case, I'm starting with a u sub 0, so I'd put in a 0 there. And then I'd go, it's multiplying by 1.5. That's the same as I had before. That's cool. Okay, and then its starting number was 32, so I go 32 right there. And now I can just go to my table, second table, and I can see all my numbers, 32, 48, 72, 108, etc. Okay. I'm going to go back to the y equals screen. If you can copy my y equals screen, you'll have it. The hard part that's hard for you to see there, it's in the parentheses, it says 1.5 parentheses. Okay. I'll just set this off to the side over here so you can still see it, but the computer can't. Then, I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. In this problem, the most common mistake I get is people divide the wrong way. And they think that the number you should use here, they do it backwards. And they get like 1.086 blah, blah, blah. If you got that, you did it the wrong way. You're supposed to take this one divided by that one. And when you do, you'll get 0.9, what is it? Somebody do that yet? 0.92. So that means that that's the factor you'd put in your calculator. And once you've done this, you put it into your calculator. You can figure out the sixth term, and you can figure out which term would be this. If your table is off a smidgen, and it says like 24.26 or something, it's fine. Don't worry about if your decimals are off just a tiny bit. It's because I rounded. And one last thought on the worksheet is there's a mistake on the key, and I want to tell you which number it is. Number 6. If you get as far as that in class, I'd be surprised, but number 6, this one, I thought that this was one of those kind where you multiply by a decimal. And so I just divided this divided by this, and I got 0.646 or something like that. So I thought it was a multiply by a decimal. It's not. How do you get from 6.24 to that? Well, there's two ways. You could multiply by 0.646, but then that won't work to get from here to here. So, you know what I mean? Like from here to here, the 0.646 number won't work. So you got to think of it as an add problem. And this one actually turns into an add, I think it's what, 2 point something? I think it's add 2.2 something. 2.21 or whatever. It's an add one. Don't get confused like I did. All right. That's all the advice I have for you for today.